So anytime you bring up Zelda's 35th anniversary, you get two crowds online. You get one that simply thinks that Nintendo has forgotten about this anniversary altogether, and Skyward Sword HD is all we're going to be seeing for this Zelda 35th celebration. Then you have the entire other side of the internet that I tend to agree with more, and that is that we are getting a lot more Zelda announcements to come in the future, and Nintendo is simply not ready to focus on Zelda's 35th anniversary yet, and we will probably see it bleed in to 2022. So with that in mind, today I want to share the games that are 2D Zelda games that I strongly believe that we will need to see remastered and re-released at some point, and hopefully a few of which will be released alongside Zelda's 35th anniversary. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now guys, today we got to continue our discussion around Zelda's 35th anniversary and my personal predictions for what we will see Nintendo do to celebrate probably their biggest, if not second biggest franchise of all time. And guys, I am not in the camp, as I stated earlier, that I think that Nintendo's done and they're glossing over this 35th celebration. I think they're just simply, it's not the time yet, and the best case scenario is if we would get a Zelda focused direct as soon as like April to outline their plan for the rest of the year. I think the more likely scenario, the more that there's new rumors and things floating around, is that we will see it somewhere in the month of June or July to set up the back half of 2021 and maybe even the early part of 2022 to focus on Zelda's 35th anniversary. Now I want to start with some 2D Zelda games that I think we are less likely to see be remade at this point in time, and we will kind of go in the direction of which ones I think we will actually for sure see come to the Nintendo Switch at some point, if not sooner rather than later, in the Zelda 35th anniversary celebration. So to start off, the game that I think that will not be remade and that I don't think that we can expect anytime soon on the Nintendo Switch would be kind of like the most recent 3DS releases, and that's like your Triforce Heroes. While it's a great multiplayer experience, I think it's very recent in the DS, and it's so recent that it probably won't get focused on as a Nintendo Switch release. The same thing goes for Zelda A Link Between Worlds, because that is kind of a remake of A Link to the Past, which we will mention later on. But it's also kind of not, because it's its own thing, but it's also very good in the visual department. It would probably be an easy port for Nintendo to do at some point, but I think because it's such a recent title in Zelda's overall history, I don't think we see either one of those come anytime soon. I think we're going to get some more focus on the classics, kind of like we saw with the Link's Awakening remaster, because that was simply a game that was so popular in the fan base, and they remade it from the ground up with a new art style and sold it individually at $60 a piece, and it did incredibly well in terms of sales numbers. So I think Nintendo gives the hardcore fans kind of like the biggest titles that they want first. Now there's a bunch of rumors floating around with Zelda Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, as Phantom Hourglass recently got a trademark renewal, and while that is possible to come to the Switch, it definitely would need a lot of focus and love to get that thing to run on the Switch, because unless if you're trying to do it in handheld mode, which we know Nintendo will not do. I mean, we saw them release Skyward Sword with a separate set of controls so you can play whether it's docked or in handheld, and they don't rely on just purely forcing people into one control style anymore. So I do think that while Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks are very likely to come at some point in the future, I think it's less likely to see them released right away, unless if these have just been done and been developed by Grezzo already, and these are like the mystery games that we didn't expect. But I do hope to see that if they did do this, that they would maybe create like a bundle pack between both those two games, since they both play really close to each other as far as mechanics and gameplay, and they're not that different of a game from start to finish. So really, if we do see that, I hope we see it in a collection pack, but that's still on my less likely list of games that I think that we can expect for the franchise when it comes to them releasing them anytime soon. And then the next 2D Zelda that is arguably still to this day one of the best Zelda games in the entire franchise, and I'm not just saying that from my perspective. You can look online, and some of the most hardcore fans over the entire history of Zelda series still regard this game amongst the top, and that is A Link to the Past. It was truly the first full vision of what Nintendo wanted Zelda to be, and they were able to pull it off off on newer hardware than the original NES, and that is a fantastic game from start to finish. And when you talk about having, you know, time travel for the first time, and you talk about things like, you know, the overworld actually changing, giant temples to go through that are themed around different elements and things, all of that started here. Now, my first experience with Zelda was on Ocarina of Time, and when I went back and played this game after the fact, I was absolutely blown away by how massive and great of a world and some of the puzzles that they had in it. You know, to think of when it was released versus the type of gameplay it offered, it was truly revolutionary. And so I do think we see this get its remaster at some point, but as I mentioned earlier, A Link Between Worlds was really already kind of like a sequel slash re-release of this game. It had the same overworld, so while I hope that we would get this game released at some point, I think maybe what's more likely to happen is some point in the future, further down the line, maybe we're talking Zelda's 40th anniversary or who knows what, but we would get like this and A Link Between Worlds together, so A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds in a combo pack of some sort. But I think that that's less likely to happen now, but more likely to happen in the future, and I absolutely hope we do see this one, because guys, this is on the SNES, the Nintendo store right now, that you can go online and play it. So if you guys have the Switch and you have Nintendo's online service, please go in and play this one if you haven't, if you're a Zelda fan, because you'll know what I'm talking about when it comes to some of the best puzzles and the best 2D exploration ever. And I think because we can already play this title on the Switch, that also adds to the fact that it's less likely to see with its own individual re-release. But this is one that I hope we do see in the future, but probably not for the Zelda 35th anniversary. And now, guys, these titles that we're talking about going forward are really more the ones that I think we are likely to see at least talked about or re-released sooner rather than later, when it comes to even as soon as like this year or next year, when Nintendo is actually celebrating Zelda's 35th anniversary. And one of the most like high regarded 2D Zelda games, if you look at fans online, is the Minish Cap. And I do think that this game deserves its own re-release at some point in time. I hope it is sooner rather than later, but the Minish Cap did a ton of great things. It is one of the first stories in the Zelda timeline, so it's very important and pivotal into how everything unfolds with the Master Sword and the history of the entire franchise. So I think it's something that Nintendo does need to do a remake for, and it's definitely in the realm of possibility that Grezzo has already done this title, or maybe it's something that they're in development for right now. But I think because of the overwhelming great reviews of Minish Cap, it puts it up there with one that should get a Link's Awakening style treatment and should be re-released on the Nintendo Switch, probably as a standalone $60 title, is how I could see Nintendo pulling that one off. So, you know, that's in the more likely camp for this year. You know, maybe something as early as 2022, but that is definitely a title that could be out of left field that would surprise a lot of people, but one that we do need to see come to the Switch at some point regardless. The last few games we're talking about here, guys, are the ones that I most likely believe we will see in one form or fashion, or hopefully both, but I think we see each of these next titles that I'm talking about released in collection packs together, and it would be 2 and 2. And so the first thing that I think is likely is the Oracle games getting released as a remaster, probably the same visual style that we saw with Link's Awakening, and they would be released in a combo pack, because if you haven't played the Oracle games, one game influences what happens in the other, and you used to be able to link your system together or do like save file transfers. You'd get special codes and stuff that you could put into the other NPCs to basically signify that you've progressed in the other title. And I think they could pull this off really nicely now with the newer technology that we have if they included this as a combo pack. And it's kind of really cool because what one game has in Oracle of Ages, the other one doesn't have in Seasons, and vice versa. One's more focused on exploration and combat, and one is more focused on like hardcore puzzles. And so I think that does happen. I think that we absolutely get these games released together as a pack, and I think it makes a lot of sense to either do that now with the 35th anniversary, or at least in the very near future, as you know, I think we're going to see Zelda kind of continue to focus on some 3D re-releases as time goes on, but especially a number of the 2D titles now that Switch is doing so fantastic, and Breath of the Wild pushed the series forward into new uncharted territories when it comes to the popularity of the series. I think that Nintendo absolutely wants to capitalize on some of the best old 2D games that were released both in handheld and on console, and I think the Oracle games is one you could strongly argue that we might see sooner rather than later. So if you've been doing the math in your head up to this point of which titles we're talking about next, you probably already know, and that's Zelda 1 and 2, because guys, Zelda 1 is where the franchise completely started on the NES 35 years ago. So I hope Nintendo does acknowledge just in some way, shape, or form that there's a total possibility that all we see Zelda 1 have is like what Mario 35 got, which is like some kind of crazy new online multiplayer that Nintendo creates, and it's only online for, you know, while they're celebrating that 35th anniversary. So that is one direction this could go. However, I personally think that we do need to see Nintendo focus on these games, both 1 and 2, and slow down and remake them in a combo pack, because since these are the origin titles for the entire franchise, I think they need a little bit of love at this point to be brought up to the current standard, and especially Zelda 2, because this is still one that if you've been around as a Zelda fan your entire life like I have, if you go stop and meet somebody on the street and you ask them if they've beaten Zelda 2 or if they've played it or tried to play it, most likely they are not very much a fan of that game, and if they did beat it, they would say they forced themselves to get all the way through it just so they could say they marked that checkbox, you know, as a hardcore Zelda fan. And that's definitely the camp that I fell into. I found myself trying to force myself to play that game all the way through from start to finish, and it's just because it has such a different format and formula from what we normally see from Zelda games, and I just don't think it received the same love and attention that, you know, something like a Link to the Past got on the SNES. And I think that you can actually rework the game and make it great, but you have to make a lot of changes to the fundamentals like the combat and the exploration as a whole, even in the overworld. I mean, they could do so much more with this game. So I think that because the length of these titles is not near as long as other Zelda games, it would make a lot of sense for them to each, you know, give them the new engine and the new remaster and the touched up visuals and release them as a combo pack together for the original games to see some love from Nintendo. And so I hope that that does happen. I would really put, guys, these games like the Zelda 1 and 2 and then also the Oracle games in a pack being probably my 2 picks of the most likely games that we will see come in the form of remasters in the 35th anniversary collection at some point. But I do think that these ones make the most sense when it comes to sales perspectives and overall 2D Zelda games that we need to see re-released first. I would love to know, though, your guys' personal list on which ones you would prefer Nintendo to focus on and release first, and if you think that I'm correct in my theory that we will get more Zelda games or not, or if you just think that Skyward Sword HD is it and we're probably not seeing a bunch of Zelda games released anytime soon like I am predicting. So please share that with me down below in the comments. I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around this topic. So guys, make sure you share your thoughts with me. I definitely enjoyed talking with you all and seeing what you're going to be predicting for the Zelda 35th anniversary. Thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. I do truly appreciate you all sticking around until the end. I do at this point in the video want to invite you all one more time to join Sunbro Nation if you haven't done so already. Do so by subscribing below. Hit the like button on your way out on this video if you enjoyed it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope you all have a great day. Sunbro Nation, out.